I've been a CIO for about 20 years, the last 7 at Esri. And like anyone who's been in IT for a while, I've had my share of successes and failures. More successes than failures, but still some of both. I'd say it's been just about the last year or so that I've come to realize this topic of organizational change management, or OCM. When I've had success, it's because I've done a better job at that than I realized. So today I want to tell you a story about a failure and a success actually tied in the same project, and then relate that to what's coming for you with the utility network. So to start, I'd like to ask you to think about a time when something you did at work, some project you were on at work, made you feel like this. That you were really winning. Do you have something in mind? Okay. So now think about what was it about that winning moment that made it feel that way? My guess is you're thinking something about people. You're thinking about a sense of camaraderie, about how everyone came together, how you overcame some obstacle, how in the end you made your customer really happy. I doubt very many of us were thinking about the technology, right? The technology is important, but the winning comes from that sense with all the people around you. And of course, you still deliver business value, but winning projects are much more about how you're interacting with everyone else. So I want to tell you about a project that we did at Esri a few years ago. We were using Pivotal CRM to manage our tech support, and it had grown a little long in the tooth. Our sales team had moved over onto the Salesforce system, and so we said, well, why don't we move tech support from Pivotal onto the Salesforce Service Cloud? We'll be all together in one place. Piece of cake, we're just going to export the data from there, import it over there, and we'll be done. So we're going to just follow this yellow brick road. But we got into a little bit, and things got kind of rocky. First, we were hit with a 600-page requirements document from a well-meaning BA who went through and identified all the things the new system had to do. And after 3 years and 7 different project managers, we had spent a fortune putting all this stuff into the solution, getting ready to launch, and we realized this thing is just too complicated. Like, people aren't actually going to be able to use it. Then we spent another fortune to take all that stuff out before we actually launched the solution. Now, we did get it done, and if you're logging support cases with Esri, it's happening in this new system, and it's working fine. But there wasn't a lot of winning going on. There was more of this sense of relief. You know, you know that story about why do you bang yourself in the head with a hammer? It's because it feels so good when I stop. Well, that's kind of how it is when we got through this project. Okay, so now I want to tell you about the second part of the story. And that, first I got to give you a little bit of context about our global distributor network. So you probably know Esri. I think most of you are domestic customers. You know Esri in the US. But what you may not know is around the world we have 90 distributors who are dedicated to Esri's business. They're not wholly owned subsidiaries. They're their own companies, some of which we have some ownership interest in, but none of them do we have a majority interest in. So they're their own companies, and they get to make their own decisions. So we have 90 of them around the world, and they buy our software at good discounts and then can resell it in their territories. In total, the distributors are about twice the size of Esri. So if you add up their staff, population, or their business, their gross revenue, in total they're about twice as big as Esri is. So when we talk about Esri plus the distributors, it's 3 times as big as it is with just Esri. Okay, so we have this global distributor network, and this is how our business used to work. We would sell to the distributor, who would then sell to the end customer. If the end customer had a problem, they would contact their distributor, who would then contact Esri. We had this kind of linear arm's length relationship with that international customer at the end. But over time, what's happened is we've moved into more of a triangular relationship because of a number of things that I'm sure you're experiencing as well. First, as we've introduced more SaaS offerings, that means that customer who's using Esri product is in a more intimate relationship with Esri directly. And then just the nature of what's happening in the world with communications and the internet, everything's shrinking, right? So we're becoming more tied together with our distributors, with the international customers. The distributors are still very, very important to our business. They know the local market. They know the local regulations. There's no way that part of our business is changing. It's just the way the relationship has worked is changing. So back to our story. We're in the US, and we're using the Service Cloud successfully now. But we've got our distributors, the rest of the world, who are taking support cases from customers, and they escalate them to Esri when there's a problem. Esri folks no longer know who that end customer was. We just know the distributor's got a problem. We don't know if it's a huge customer on fire or a little issue. So we said, well, let's figure out how we extend this single Service Cloud instance. How do we make it so all of our distributors can also log their support cases in that same instance? So again, we're going to follow Yellow Brick Road. But this time, it was all unicorns and rainbows because we delivered a great solution in just a few months. And subsequently, adoption has been really, really good. We started back at the end of 2016. We had 3 distributors go live. Right now, we're at 27. And by the end of the year, we'll be over 40. So, and remember, this is an opt-in sort of thing. Distributors get to make their own decisions. So we're not getting them there because they're being mandated as much as we're inviting them in. Now, in full disclosure, I think they actually are mandated now, but when we started, it wasn't like that. It was an opt-in, invite kind of process. Okay, so what was different with this second part of the project? Well, one, we had better experience. We learned something from that first effort, and we made the switch from a waterfall to an agile methodology. Those of you who've dealt with both know when you work in agile, you have, when you screw up, you know it sooner than if you wait longer, yeah? But the big change was we put people first in the way we thought about the project that we were doing. And I would say I didn't quite appreciate that at the time, but as I've been learning more about organizational change management over this last year, it's become apparent to me that that's what happened. So I want to introduce you to this framework of 7 conditions for successful organizational change management. Like I said, I didn't know about this framework back when we did that project, but I've come to realize that this was what was going on. So let me touch on each one of these briefly in the context of our project. So the first one is alignment, and that's really getting your whole team to think about the same why it is that we're doing something. So if you've got everyone aligned on why we're doing something, then it's a lot easier to get to the what and the how that we're going to actually get it done. When we did our second project, we knew the why was we're going to give much better tech support to our international customers. Everyone understood that was the why. And as we made decisions, we could look at them through that lens and say, does this actually advance that, or is it just off to the side, we don't need to worry about it? So having the team rallied around a single why, or at least a consistent why, is very helpful. Second one is design. This is a tired example, I know, but it's still a really good one. Apple changed the way people think about using technology by making products that are just intuitive and easy to use. I'd say that was more true maybe a couple generations ago. I'm a little confused now about my iPhone, but this is like, you know, these are products they don't make anymore, right? This is back a little bit. So this is really what tripped us up in the first one. We made a design that was very highly functional, but not very highly usable for people. And I think this is a good example of think about making the design really, really good for people, worry about the user experience, and worry less about getting every last function in there, because if the functions are there but your product isn't usable, it doesn't really matter. It's like it didn't happen, right? Okay, so the third one is capacity. You can get this expression, I think, on your own. I don't need to say it. The thing is, if you don't give your people time to actually get the project done, you're just side-loading them, and you're putting all the work that they're doing at risk, right? I think managers understand this intellectually. It's harder for us to actually put it into practice, right? There's many, many more good ideas out there than you probably have staff to accomplish them or resources to accomplish them. So part of being a good leader is figuring out which of all the good ideas it is I'm going to just say no to, or at least say no to for right now. If you can do that, then you give your staff more capacity to be able to really focus and get the job done. Okay, fourth is communications. Meredith touched on this some. 3 rules for communications. First, they've got to come from someone that matters. Got to come from an important voice. Second, they've got to be WIFI. Do folks know this acronym WIFI? WIFI stands for What's in It for You. So when I'm talking to you right now, I tried to think, well, what's in it for you to listen to this 10 or 15 minute talk? So keeping your communications WIFI, writing them from the perspective of who's going to read this rather than the perspective of who's going to say it is really, really important. And third, they got to be timely. Communication only works. Now I used to have teenage kids. Now I have a 20-year-old and a 22-year-old. And this is where you learn timeliness in communications, right? You can say things to them over and over and over again, and it was like it never happened. But if they happen to be listening at the time when you're talking to them, then all of a sudden it works. So communication only really happens when the recipient is listening. Doesn't happen when the speaker is speaking. So you've got to meet them where they are at the moment when it's going to be timely. For us, in our global support project, the best example of this was after we got those first distributors on board, we had a meeting with all the other distributors, and we wanted to pitch them on you should get to be part of this. And so the project manager, the 7th project manager, got up and made his pitch, which was good, but then he invited on stage a support analyst from our Canadian distributor, and that analyst just talked about, in a very genuine voice, how this solution had made her life easier. And that is when we got a whole bunch of distributors to come in, because they heard from an important voice. It was WIFI, it's in their world, and it was timely because it just happened and they were ripe for the taking. Okay, 5th is learning. You've got to allow your team to learn, and you've really got to allow them to screw up or fail along the way, because that's how they'll get better and go into the next thing. This is really part of Agile too, right? You try to learn in the cycles and not get too far off track before you continue on. In global support, for our global support effort, our big learning was really that with that first project and realizing we can't do these monster requirements documents anymore. It's just not going to work for us. So that was my big learning, and it's still paying dividends today in every project my team does now. Okay, the stakeholder engagement. There are not great pictures on the web of stakeholders, so this is the best one I came up with. But you'll remember this one. Almost nothing works in a business if you don't have the people who are going to benefit from it really committed to it. So stakeholder engagement means they're present, they're supportive, they're part of your communication strategy. In our case, Nick Frunze, who runs our tech support organization, was a big stakeholder at the front. And then as soon as Jack saw that a few distributors were really winning, well, then Jack became a big champion. And any of you who've interacted with him know when he's decided something should happen for you, it's hard to say no. Okay, and then the last condition is support. So anytime you roll something new out, you've got to be ready to deal with things that didn't go quite right, or people who don't understand, or folks who didn't read the memo, whatever it is, and be really ready to catch them. So that's making sure your documentation is there, your service desk staff are trained. In our case, we ran a war room for 2 weeks after the launch, where we literally just had people sitting on a conference bridge continuously. And if you had an issue, you'd call into that bridge. You might join conversation with other folks who are having similar issues, and we just solved it informally there and kept on going. We've still logged tickets and dealt with the typical support process, but having that war room concept really helped. Okay, so here we are again. These are the 7 conditions I just ran through. Now, my story was about a support implementation, support system implementation, but I really think this approach can work for any project. So as you tackle the utility network that Esri has bequeathed on you, you will hopefully be able to benefit from this. I know SSP has this program called UNAP to help with that. I don't know anything about UNAP, but they've told me it will help with these 7 things, and I guess since you're here, you ought to take them at their word. So if you like this construct, this is the book that I drew it from. It's called People Before Things. And I actually have the author here today. Chris, do you want to stand up? That's Chris Laping. Chris lives in Denver. So when this all just came together, I'd read this book, I met Chris, I said, hey, I'm going to be in Denver giving this talk on organizational change management, maybe you should join me. Actually, first I said, maybe you should give the talk, save me the trip. But he's gracious enough to find time in his schedule to join us today. And so when I first met Chris, he asked me the same question that I asked you at the start about when did you really feel like you were winning and what made it feel that way. And my answer was this global support project, which is how this all came together today. It was about 9 months after we'd launched that. I was in Providence. I was in Providence for EGOG, actually, a conference that probably many of you were at. And a woman from one of our distributors found me across the bar. Came over. Her name's Danielle Kairovicius. And do you guys know her? No. Do you? Okay, wow. That's surprising. Okay, so she sought me out to tell me about how much she really appreciated this project. And I mean, I've gotten lots of thank yous for things I've done over the years, but this one is the one that's really stuck with me because of just how out of the blue it was and how much effort she put into, in a weird context, to find me and make this point. So I really appreciated that. I'm going to have a table with Chris at lunch. So if you want to talk more about this topic, meet Chris and chat about organizational change management. We'd love to hear about your successes or challenges and ways that we can also learn to do that better. Thanks very much.